What's going on, you guys? Gaming Ad here, coming at you for another video. We got a review for you guys today. How many of you really enjoyed the old Nintendo platformers? You know, the 2D platformers with Mario? If you enjoyed that, you might actually like this game I'm about to review. It's called Ori and The Will, the Wisps. Now, it is a sequel from the Moon Studios' Ori and the Blind Forest. And coincidentally, both of these are on Gamepass, so you can definitely, right after you watch this video, go straight over there and click download if you have a subscription, or you can use the trial, or you can pay $10 a month for these fantastic experiences. If you do want to buy it, it is $30, so you can definitely buy it flat out. It's on Steam, it's on Windows Store, and it's on the Xbox. So without any further ado, here's my review on Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So the graphics of this game is definitely one of the highlights. It's just gorgeous, you know, from the particle effects to how everything rolls to, you know, there's a couple sections in the game where you're in complete darkness and the only thing you can see is just a couple inches in front of you, behind you, above you, and below you. And the platforming in these parts are extremely challenging because you have so little, you know, visibility to these areas. And I really appreciated that they really built on the platforming when it comes to scenarios like this, because there were a couple that was in the Blind Forest, but not to this extent. There's a whole area in this one. Now, one of the biggest things I will say about Moon Studio and how they make games is their story. They are really good at making a story with a narrative without saying one single word. And I have to always give my hat off to any developer that can do this almost impossible task, because it's not an easy one to do. So that's what you see the majority in Ori and the Will of the Wisps. You see a lot of narrative focused explaining with no words. It's just pure emotion. They do a very good job at it, you know, from the start to the finish. There's not really a whole lot of, you know, driven dialogue. But when you read these and you see the emotion that the characters are doing on screen, it really resonates. And let me tell you guys, like, they do a good job at it. Now, I would say one of the biggest improvements that they have in the Will of the Wisp over Blind Forest is how they do pretty much the entire combat system. They've rehauled the entire system, the whole engine, how everything functions. Nothing is the same like it was in Blinded Forest, and I will explain to you why. In the original Ori, or in the Blind Forest, they had this orb that actually followed you around, and it would shoot these little projectiles at people, or you could charge them all into one burst and do massive damage to anyone around you. They've completely redone the entire mechanics of this game. Nothing is similar to what it was in Breath of the Wild. Ori and the Will of the Wisp kind of has like a Dark Souls feeling, and I hate when I use that term because a lot of people use that term in loosely, you know, everything has to be, you know, this version of the Dark Souls or that version of Dark Souls. But I do feel like it's really good to put it with this scenario because, you know, you feel like at every turn you can get killed by a couple enemies, especially if you're playing on the harder difficulties. And they've really added on to when it comes to what you want to fight with. You start the game with nothing, and then you end up getting a sword, and then, you know, a sword can turn into a hammer, it can turn into a bow and arrow, maybe even a spear. You know, you get one of those. And what I really enjoyed about these abilities is they took a lot of fine detail in how they use it. So like when you use the spear, you pull way back and you throw it, so it feels like you're actually throwing like a Zeus's, you know, lightning bolt. And they did a fantastic job showing the demonstration to when you use these abilities, because sometimes when you use these abilities, you do feel you know, you feel powerful. And a lot of these type of games, that is the goal, to make the player feel powerful, that they have these abilities. Another huge thing I have to give props to Moon Studios is how exactly they did the map. The map is very detailed now, you know, and they actually added side quests. They added these things called rumors. Now let me get into side quests real quick. You know, it happens just like your average game. You go to one location, they tell you, oh, I need something from this location. You go to that location, and they'll tell you what rewards you have. It'll be below on the bottom right. And I really enjoyed that they put that kind of interaction in it. And, you know, you might get currency from it, maybe an ability, and you can use the currencies to upgrade abilities. And that's a really nice thing. But then they added these things called rumors. Now, what a rumor is when there's certain things that's on the map that you would normally have to go explore. Now, you could talk to an NPC and he could tell you about some kind of legend or something where he came from or his home village, and where he thinks that there's still something there. And then what happens is the map will pop up and it will put a dot on it that says a rumor is over here, and it's encouraging you to go search on that part of the map to find that rumor. And I actually thought this was a fantastic way to put this mechanic into this game, and it worked very well. Now, how they handled abilities in general is they did this little RPG system. So it's like a tree. You get 3 abilities and you can unlock more, slots as the game progresses and you get certain items in the game. Now, what I really liked about this is a lot of the abilities that you got in the first one were put into this system. So, for instance, you didn't get the bow in the first one, but you can change abilities as well. So instead of shooting 1 projectile with the bow, you can get this ability to shoot 3. And the underwater breathing from the first one, for instance, they put that in there as well. So it gives you enough incentive to really build that class the way you want to and build it around the items and abilities you want to use in that playthrough. And the more options, the better is always my thing. For those of you that really watch my content, you see me in ILP, you know that I'm a huge fan of boss fights. I'm a huge fan of the atmosphere of boss fights, and it's one of the biggest key components that can get me into your game is if you did boss fights well. And I'm here to tell you, Ori and The Will of the Wisps did not let anyone down. They have amazing boss fights. Now, it's not a whole lot of them, and I would have appreciated a little bit more boss fights, but the ones that they did have, I felt, the excitement, the intense moments. It was a very awesome experience. There's some of these bosses that aren't necessarily hard. They have very clear patterns, but they're fun fighting. And at the end of the day, sometimes having fun fighting a boss is a better quality in the game than having a hard time fighting the boss because of a difficulty. Now, would I say that these bosses are extremely hard? No. Would I say they're extremely easy? No. I feel like Ori and The Will of the Wisps has a really good middle ground when it comes to fighting bosses. They give you all the tools you need to fight them, and they give you all these different abilities where you can fight in different ways. And my hat's off to them because that's definitely not easy to do. Now, what they did when it comes to multiplayer, now this game doesn't necessarily have multiplayer, your standard PvP or PvE multiplayer, but what it does have is it has these speed runs that you can compete with your friends. And Moon Studio did a really good job with this because it's something small they can put in the game to give enough incentive to keep these players playing it. Once you beat the story, you don't necessarily have to play it again. You can go to these trials and you can get a couple of your friends and let's see who can do this better. Let's see who can do this faster. And that will go a long way. Trust me. Now, as much as I love this game, there are a couple things that, not necessarily would make me want to dock the game, but I did want to bring up. For instance, in the very beginning of the game, when you take over as Ori, it doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail as part of going through the first game. Like, I know that they don't want to really go through a whole lot of experience when it comes to Ori being in the first game, but I did think it should acknowledge that the first game existed, and to me, it didn't. It felt like this is a completely a new adventure that doesn't really acknowledge the fact that Ori done what Ori did in the Blinded Forest. For instance, you don't even have stuff like double jump at the beginning of the beginning of Will of the Wisps. And I felt like they should have incorporated a little bit better from explaining maybe that there was a first one or if there wasn't a first one, because to me it felt like these are 2 entirely different adventures and they don't really interact with each other. But there are characters from the second one that clearly came in from the first one, but for some reason they never admit or even really go into the fact that the first adventure happened. The biggest issue I had with this game is clearly there are some issues performance-wise. I did play this on the Windows 10 version, played a little bit on the S. Now, I wouldn't say the S is unplayable, but it was, there's a lot of freezes, there was a lot of hiccups. I didn't really encounter these too much on the Windows 10 version. Now, keep in mind, I did play this before the patch 1. I didn't play any more on the S after the patch 1 because I had such a better experience on the PC version that I went ahead and stayed on there. I was told that there is a patch that's fixed all those issues on the S and the X, but I'm sure there's forums you can look at. Moon Studio definitely does fine-tune these things, so I'm assuming by the time you've watched this review, the majority of these will be fixed. But definitely look into that if you're a little skeptical about buying this game because of the performance issues. But to my knowledge right now, they're pretty much fixed, and if there are some left there, then it's minor. But I'll go over a couple of the the issues that I had. Like I said, I had frame rate issue, I had freezing issues. Now, I did on the Windows 10 version, I had like checkpoint skips to where I would get to a certain section of the map and it would force a checkpoint in the next room. And sometimes that's not an issue, and sometimes it would even help you. It means you didn't have to go through that room. But when you get checkpointed into that next room and you're behind a destructible wall that you have to blow up from the other side, you're literally stuck there. And I feel like Moon Studio knew this going into the game because they have a feature in the main menu to where you can load up previous save files. Now, me personally, if I were to guess what happened, I would say they had the original manual save that came in from Blinded Forest through the majority of the dev cycle of this game. And when people gave, a huge vocal output feedback that they didn't like that system and they did this autosave system, that, it definitely hurt them a little bit. I don't know. I'm not a dev. I don't know anything about that. I don't know if they've spoken about that. It wasn't a huge issue. Now, I do know that some people had to restart the game because of this issue. But, it's like I said, that's pretty much the only issues I had in the game. When it comes to this game, I cannot describe you enough how much this is a masterpiece. I thought Blinded Forest was a masterpiece. It is. To a point, they have not made a bad game in any single way. But this game is a legit masterpiece. I could not find one negative thing that I had issues with this game that didn't have to do with the performance and me nitpicking the beginning of the game, which we did that because they wanted it to be welcome to anyone new playing the game that didn't have to have any kind of knowledge to the previous game. And a lot of developers do that. I just feel like they can do it a little bit better. Go download this game. This game is amazing. Go buy this game if you want to support the devs. It is worth your $30. Go buy it on Steam because the PC version runs flawlessly. This is one of those games that you play and you remember from everything. Like, I didn't really bring it too much and I should have. The music is amazing. And I had it on my notes, but for some reason I went through it. I got in a rant. But the music is just amazing. I would put this music up there with, maybe not necessarily Halo, but it's definitely moving. When you get into these, like I said, there's no words in this game. So they had to really captivate you somewhere else. And they did it with the music. When you're fighting the bosses, the music gets more and more epic as long as the fight goes. Buy this game, you guys. But anyway, put in the comment section below. What did you guys feel about Ori? Did any of you play it? Did you play the first one? Tell me what you guys really enjoyed about the first one. And, definitely hit in that, comment section your overall perspective feeling if you're watching this after you beat Will of the Wisps. And is this something that you would really like, them to continue the franchise? But, put that in the comment section below. This is Gaming Addict. I'm out of here. Peace.